you're always going to feel that loss. It may not just feel as ever present as the day they left, but that loss is always there. Well, I think we need to get better at, as a society, of recognizing that grief is a hole that doesn't ever really get filled. It may change shape, but it doesn't ever get filled. And that's okay. We learn to live with grief. Grief doesn't disappear.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. I am honoured today to sit in connection and conversation with someone who I have so much love for. Kristianah Fasunloye is a PR strategist, NLP coach, non-executive director and board member, and she's spent over 2 decades in public, private and charity sectors driving systemic change towards a more equitable world, and is an all-round incredible human being. And she is a friend who's like family, a soul sister and beacon of light in my world, including giving me support on the daily as I walk my own path of grief after the death and then birth of my little lioness-hearted baby girl, Narco Rayona, last year. Kristianah truly embodies love, purpose, community care, and not shying away from those difficult conversations. So Kristianah, welcome. I am so honoured to have you here as my first guest.
Oh, thank you. That is an amazing introduction. I'm like, oh, just going to sit with that. And, it's interesting how, I don't know, sometimes we see ourselves and how other people see us when we show up for them. So thank you for that intro. It was lovely.
That's beautiful. And it's also so well-deserved, all from my heart. So let's start and center into this space. I'm just going to do a little check-in of how are you really feeling in this moment today? What's coming up for you?
I am trying not to be ill right now. Apart from that, I'm good. And I think the conversation that we're going to have is going to be, I think we'd say it might be triggering for some. And I'm hoping that lots of people get a lot out of it because it's a personal story to me and it's also a personal story to you.
Yes, exactly that. And thank you as well for that prompt. So just shining that little compassionate spotlight that we are going to be covering topics of miscarriage, of pregnancy loss, of termination for medical reasons. So if you are personally affected by any of those or anything adjacent to it, obviously we're sending you lots and lots of love, and just with that little warning up front. Thank you so much, Kristianah, for that. And obviously honouring you as well with your sickness too. As you know, I'm definitely an advocate for rest. So
I know
after this podcast, you can get good rest. All about the rest. So let's center ourselves into your story and how it relates to you and your death on the daily. So as I'm going to ask all of my guests, you can root us in wherever you wish in your story. I would love for you to share and we will flow from there in conversation.
Okay. So I'm going to root back into a few years ago when I had gone on holiday to Ibiza, partied hard, like really partied hard, came home to my wonderful partner and then got pregnant. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then got to 12 weeks and went for my 12-week scan to find out that the baby wasn't growing and I would need to have a medical termination. Had to have the conversation with my boss, who was a woman boss, and I have so much love and respect for how she showed up for me. And she was like, okay, you need to get a second opinion. You need to take some time off and you need to come back to work when you're ready. And I don't want to see you before then. And bearing in mind, I headed up a busy press team, was responsible for reputation management for a whole organisation that had in excess of 7,000 people. And so I took the time off, went in for my consultation regarding my medical termination, had a lovely nurse that really showed up because they gave me two options. They said, we can put you to sleep and do it that way, or you can take some tablets, go home, and then the fetus will come out by itself. And this nurse, she shared with me the fact that she had taken the tablets herself and it hadn't worked, and she still had to come in and be put to sleep and have the rest of the fetus removed. So the fact that that nurse shared with me, and I was like, I don't really want to have to go through this twice. Once is enough. I decided to be put to sleep and have the medical termination. It was the first time I really saw my partner cry. I think he was so upset. And it came with a lot of guilt, I think, for me. Partied hard in Ibiza, then got pregnant, and then blamed myself for the fact that this had happened. And it took a lot of time for me to process that guilt and to not blame myself. Anyway, spring forward a couple of years, and I now work in partnership with my amazing business partner. And we got approached to head up what was the largest NHS review at the time, and it's something called the Ockenden Review, and I'm sure many of you would have heard of it. So this review looked into 15,000 families over a 20-year period who had fought to find out what had happened in their maternity care. And these are mothers that basically, some of them lost their lives, babies died, and babies were born with serious life-changing injuries. And I was the passionate advocate for working on this project. My business partner was not. She had real concerns for me at that time about what it would do to my own mental state, working on something that is so challenging and hits home in such a real way. For me, it was really about, these are women that experienced death in a way that they shouldn't have. They'd gone into hospital to give birth to their baby, and many of them didn't come home with that baby or come home themselves. And in this day and age, that is not how our maternity system should work. And for me, it was really important to shine a light on this story and also kind of create a blueprint for others. And I think if I hadn't been through my own miscarriage and seen such compassion from a nurse who told me her own experience, and she didn't need to, and actually was treated really well throughout all of that, to then hear of people not being treated well at all, and the pain that they went through. I know what happened in my case. There was no guilt. The guilt that I carried, I really shouldn't have. There was nothing that could be done in any circumstances. Sometimes babies just don't form, they don't grow properly, and that's life. But for others who their baby was fine and they went into hospital and then just didn't come home with that child, it was like, okay, something needs to change. So this became something that I worked on with my business partner for 2.5 years, to really shine a light on maternity services, to tell the story of these families, to change the system, to ensure that hospitals have specific guidelines in place, that they listen to women, mothers, about their bodies and what's important to them and what they feel is right. And also to actually, secure investment. Our NHS is massively underfunded. We've had a Conservative government for so long that is destabilising our NHS. And also, I think, to be honest, one of my biggest fears is I would get pregnant again, and I would be one of those women, because Black women are 5 times more likely to die than white women in maternity care. I didn't want to be one of those women. So I think also there was a fear driving that. So when I got pregnant again, I would have a good maternity, care around me. I would have support. They would know what they were doing. They would listen to me. And if I'm involved in a review that's driving that change, and actually it works, not only does it work for me, it works for everyone else. So I worked on that. And then obviously I went to this organisation called PLU Tanya, People Like Us, where we both met, where I did my speech, my business partner Shalene, and you did yours. and told the story of this fantastic work that we did to, make sure every NHS trust up and down the country is working to make maternity care safer, over £400 million of investment in maternity services, etc., etc. And you and I became friends. And I then found out that you were pregnant. So excited for you. And then I remember receiving your text, and my heart broke for you. And in that moment, I was like, I need to call you. I just need to call you. And so then began a conversation about miscarriage and medical terminations between you and I for a number of weeks and months, just to try and make sure that you were okay. Sorry.
No,
and I think for me, I didn't have anyone who understood what I was going through when it happened to me. And so I wanted you to know that you were not alone.
Thank you so much, Kristianah. Literally, I'm going to. And tears are definitely welcome on this podcast because it's so important, again, in bringing death out of the shadows, that we allow ourselves to really, really feel. And that you were there, you were by my side, literally from literally as I left the hospital, and you never left my side. And that meant so much to me in every part of this healing journey. And like you shared, to know that I was not alone. I have a small handful of women who were able to really step up in that space. It's you and two others. And actually, without you, I would have absolutely felt completely alone and isolated, because, the conversations that we could have could go into those spaces of those deepest fears and everything, as well as acknowledging the little glimmers of joy as well, as I sort of navigated my path and the birth of my daughter and getting to meet her briefly and all of that stuff. But really, to circle back onto your story, and what I think is really, really, it resonated with me when I saw you do that when we first met, and you did your incredible talk on the Ockenden Review, and all of your and Shalene as well, your business partner, all of your incredible systemic work that's just so fundamentally important, given that inequity in our health service. And obviously, as you shared as well, the critical underfunding and everything else that just needs to be completely overhauled. But what I can really feel is that web of connection. You talked of your boss, you talked of that nurse, you then talked of everything that you have then gone and done through that sense of purpose, and obviously driven by those justifiable fears as well that you hold. So tell me more around, I really want to root into that sort of the web of support that you felt and the importance that you place on it.
I think for me, I have friends who have children, I have friends who don't. None of them had miscarried, so they didn't really understand, what it's like to go through it and to get to that point where you think you're safe at 12 weeks. They always say, when you go to the hospital, don't tell anyone until you're like past your 12-week scan, because at that point you think you're okay, you're out of danger. And so, what was really interesting when Mum told me afterwards that she had miscarried, and I was like, okay, now you tell me, like, you didn't tell me this like years ago, but you're telling me now. And I think also the boss, her name is Sue, and she has 2 daughters herself. And because her daughter had miscarried previously, she understood what it meant for someone to get to that stage and then be in a position where actually you were looking for you and you'd started to make all these plans because you think you're safe, you've got to 12 weeks, and actually that's not the case. And she was just really supportive. Like, she really advocated She did all the legwork with HR. We agreed lines to my team and the rest of the department about why I wasn't there, because I wasn't really ready to share with everyone else at that moment in time. And then the check-ins that she did with me to just make, are you okay? How are you feeling? Don't worry about work, everything's covered. And I feel like the nurse as well, who, and I think this is really important, she looked like me. She looked like me. And she spent the time telling me about, and she didn't have to, actually, this is what I think is the best course of option for you, because already I can see that you are, this is a lot going on for you and a lot for you to take in. And this is your first pregnancy. You need to think about what is going to help you to move forward. And obviously, if you have to come back in again, is that going to be the best thing for you? And so just having people at different points, and my friends were lovely, don't get me wrong, they were absolutely lovely, ones that knew, but ultimately they hadn't gone through it themselves. So there's so much support people can give you when they don't really understand your pain or your experience. And I just feel like those people showed up in a way that, I would like everyone to show up for everyone else, but they don't always do. And I think it's really important that those people showed up for me, and it's the least I can do to show up for someone else who may need it, because actually that was the difference that made the difference for me. And then I'm hoping that Ockenden made the difference to the maternity service, so when everyone gets pregnant, it's a bit safer going forward. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I think what I can really sort of capture in that essence is, obviously there's the broader purpose that's flowed into your work in Ockenden, and that systemic change, and actually such courage for you to face into that. But also then there's those really simple interactions that take us seconds, to check in with someone, or to say I'm here, and just sort of to reflect from sort of my journey that was absolutely, you were there. But also for me, the critical, I suppose, difference between, again, to your point of us being able to talk to it when we've got that lived experience, and being able to support other women, because we never, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I know how devastating it is, and I would never want this to happen to anyone on this planet, but unfortunately it does. Nature is nature, and nature can be cruel. And for me, having you immediately by my side, but also telling me in the moment where I called you when I was when Jordan was driving us back from the hospital after we received the diagnosis, and we knew obviously that our baby girl wasn't going to be able to survive beyond 36 hours at best, and therefore we knew that termination for medical reasons was the path that we were going to be going down. And what was so incredible was the fact that it was at the moment when I said to you, I can't do this, Kristianah, I can't, I'm good. This is going to kill me. I will not get out of this alive. And you said to me, you can. And then you shared very gently, again, without sort of just bowling in there, you gave me the space to sort of give you that permission to do so. And you said to me, because this is my story, and you shared it. And in that moment, I was like, wow, okay, I'm not alone, and there is a life on the other side. You gave me that hope, and that you can as well was in the previous podcast, in episode 1. If you haven't heard it, go back to hear my full story. But in episode 1, I shared around that call to presence, and actually after our phone call, I then felt Nakarayona kicking in my stomach, and I made my commitment of presence to her. I made that commitment. I'm going to be with you no matter what through all of this. And I was. And you were the absolute catalyst of that, because where I was before was in that kind of, okay, I'm disconnecting from this. There's no way I can get through this. And you just reminded me. And you also reminded me that, unfortunately, there are many, many other women who have been through this. I'm not the first. I won't be the last. And actually, there is strength and resilience that is rooted through my veins, through my ancestry, through the community and everything that I live in. So that was so important to me.
I think for me, that whole "you're not alone" was really important. The boss, the nurse, the friends and family that showed up, because it's not easy. They're getting ready for the process, they're having the process, after the process, the guilt, the questions that you have. And there's a lot that goes on in our own minds that we're trying to work out. And just knowing someone actually that lived experience is so important to share, because we don't talk about miscarriage. It's this thing that happens in the shadows and people don't share. And so I went through it thinking this doesn't happen to anyone. It doesn't happen to anyone I know. So who can I speak to that you can Google to Google till the cows come home, but there's so much information out there, it doesn't make it doesn't feel real. And sometimes you just need that connection with the person to bring it to life for you in a way that you can't get the information off the internet, or the doctor can do it for you. And I think when I received your message, it was so instinctive to reach out to you. I didn't think twice. It was like, no, you need support. You need to know that you're going to be all right and you can do this. You will get through it, because it seems like a mountain that you'll never climb, because you get the news, Tanya, and then you've got a waiting period before the termination for medical reasons happens. And that period of time is when where I found my mind spiral a lot. A lot. And so it's just about, for me, it was about, I'm not sure how present I was myself when I was going through my own medical termination. And I really wanted you, because I know you as someone who's so grounded in self and in nature, to really ground into that. And also for me, I didn't want you to have any regrets for how you showed up for yourself and how you showed up for Lioness Heart, because of who you are as a person and how you show up. So it was kind of like a call to action to go, okay, T's going to be T here. T is going to be her best self in this, horrible situation. You're going to be your best self. And we did. And we just chatted every day, We had a conversation, we had messages, and you really lent into your feelings. And I think for me also, it was cathartic. It was really cathartic to share with someone who really understood what I was talking about and what it means to, and although our medical terminations were at different points, the whole process of it is something that you never expect to hear.
Yeah. And I think that lived experience, and where you shared around that sort of the guilt that comes up, and you gave me those prompts. It was you through your lived experience. And obviously I think I feel like there's something so powerful in the legacy that our own grief can give us, through us helping others to navigate through similar situations, which is exactly what you did. Because I remember you messaging me and speaking to me on many many hours and hours of calls, and saying to me, don't blame yourself, don't go into the grief spiral. And even that just helped me to check myself, to allow what was coming up, because obviously we know that sort of the denial and bargaining and all of that stuff comes up through grief, but to be really present to it. And I just think you so selflessly gave from that place of your own experience and your own healing. And honestly, it literally changed everything. And I've actually got a few quotes that I pulled out from our WhatsApp messages together.
Tanya.
which you know what was really, as I was reading them, I was like, these messages are the embodiment of community care and connection, and how literally even in just sending like a WhatsApp message that might take you seconds or maybe longer, sometimes you have to put a bit thought into it, etc., but not very long to send. And it changed everything. Every single morning, I remember that message. I'd see Kristianah pop up in my notification. Oh, what's the prompt today? And it was always something that I needed, even if I didn't know that I needed it. And so, even just one, I'm going to start off with the real simple ones, but even when you messaged me to say, just popping up and saying good morning or good morning, sweet pea, you know, those ones on the days where I was just lost for words, and just to know that someone was there. Then the other ones were, you know, what's very powerful prompts, like what's important to you today, and reminding me to keep asking myself, what do I feel and what do I need to do with that feeling? Really, that constant reminder to sit with it. And as I was reading them, and then I'd see you'd send me a line, and then I'd send you like this much, a whole essay of this podcast. I'm like gesturing to show like a whole screen's worth, but a whole essay's worth of me sort of being able to share really openly. And anyone who knows any of my work in the rest space knows that I love the 7 types of rest that Sandra Dalton Smith has identified, and she talks of both emotional rest and social rest, and it's having people where we can fully express ourselves exactly where we are. We don't need to put a mask on, don't need to dress it up into something, don't need to say I'm okay to protect them or whatever it is. And with you, I could literally just let it all raw in the absolute grief. And your sort of responses were absolutely just on point of, you know, reminding me, here's another message of, it's okay to feel the ebbs and flows. We have to try to go with the flow rather than resisting the current. On a day when I was absolutely resisting and frustrated and stomping around in my grief, sort of 2 weeks after, you know, or even just that reminder of, you shared, I don't think the sadness ever goes away. It just doesn't feel as sad. Cherish it. You carried an amazing life inside you. And at a moment where everyone was trying to give me all the platitudes of everything happens for a reason, maybe it wasn't aligned, all the way through to, oh, don't worry, you know, you'll be pregnant again, you'll have another baby, all of this stuff that just is not helpful. I just want to be with where I am.
It's their way of trying to help in the way that they know how. And, you know, I'm grateful for those who try to help, even though I may not receive it in the way they want me to receive it, because I'm like, that's not what I want to hear right now. I'm not okay with that. And I think that's the thing. There's so many emotions. There are so many emotions that we go through in any type of death that we experience. And I think our conversations were more about just what are we actually feeling right now? What is this actual feeling? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it frustration? Is it all of them? You know, is it disappointment? Disappointment was a big one that came up for me that I didn't quite realise under everything else, you know, when I dug a bit deeper. And it's just, you know, I think the prompts were to really get you to understand what you felt so you could move forward from it. Because if we don't process, I think, grief, it comes out in so many different ways later on because we haven't actually dealt with the emotion. We've internalized it because, you know, society makes us think we need to move on from it so quickly. Oh, this has happened. Yeah, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you should be fine. Doesn't. You've lost a life. Whether that's a parent, a child, a sibling, a relative, a friend, that person no longer exists in your world, you know. And so there's a vacuum. You never stop missing them just because they're there anymore. You're always going to feel that loss. It may not just feel as ever present as the day they left, but that loss is always there. Well, I think we need to get better at, as a society, of recognizing that grief is a hole that doesn't ever really get filled. It may change shape, but it doesn't ever get filled. And that's okay. We learn to live with grief. Grief doesn't disappear.
Yes, we grow around our grief, as we say.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important point, though, on how we're conditioned as society to give those platitudes. And I love that you brought it into gratitude, because in those moments I was just like, everyone gives me one more platitude, I'm going to flip the table. But it's an important point, because people are, you know, we're all just doing our best, aren't we? And we are conditioned by society, and that's why having these conversations and bringing our stories into the spotlight and being able to share what's helped us is so powerful. Because like you say, that grief, that hole is there. And actually I think miscarriage is a very unique type of loss as well, where there's so many I think on paper, people might say, oh, well, hang on a minute, it's only a certain amount of time, or, and you never got to properly meet them. But no. There's a connection there. There's a relationship there. And there's all of the hopes and dreams and all of the milestones and everything as well. And, I had an early miscarriage in 2021 that was, I think it was about 6 weeks in. And even that, when people as well try and compare it, oh, well, yours is so much worse. I'm like, actually, I grieved hard for that one too. Still a soul I'd connected with, I'd celebrated, I'd made all those mental plans, etc. And I think, we as society are terrible at dealing, not everybody, but just as a culture in the whole, there is a real void in us knowing how to hold space for death. And then you bring it down into the specificity as well of miscarriage, of infant loss, etc.
And it's not just for we women who miscarried, it's also for our partners who are on this journey with us, So we as the woman, our body is going through changes as soon as it knows that we're pregnant. So your body is doing this whole gymnastic thing of getting ready to grow a life. And suddenly it's not. So there's all these hormones, your body's changed, you've started to tell yourself a story about what can be, what could be. And also your partner is starting to do that with you. And so I find the support around the woman is great, but then not necessarily the support around the partner, because they too have lost. They've lost their future son or daughter. They've lost their own hopes and dreams about what that could be and what fatherhood could be for them. And I think with miscarriage, it's one of the deaths that people brush under the carpet quite a bit because they don't see it as tangible. They weren't a full person yet. Didn't matter. Actually, they were. They really were.
Yes, to all of that. I think it's such an important point, because actually you're right. The fathers, if I think about, like, I don't even know, you obviously had an incredible boss, Sue, who was so supportive, but you think of a father going into work and trying to say, my partner's miscarried or whatever it is, like, would your typical company say, oh, actually, we've got a process in place to support the dad? So, I don't know. I would assume that a lot of places are very ill-equipped for those conversations, and a lot of bosses as well. Again, that society conditioning. And similarly, in friendship groups and all sorts of other stuff, we obviously know that for men, the mental health conversation is such an important one, because again, society has kind of ingrained in that, don't show emotions, etc. So it's a really important point to raise, that taboo of miscarriage sort of also affects both parents.
Yeah, it really does. So I think the more conversations that we have around it, and we show not just what it means for us, but it also means for them, our partners as well, because they've lost too. It's not just us, and rightly so, a lot of the focus should go on the women, but also the men, I've never seen my partner cry before that time. I've never seen him cry. And so for him as well, that loss was really, really, real. And I'm not sure he had the conversations at work in the same way that I needed to, for me to have the time off, that I needed to be okay. He was still going to work. He still needed to show up. So, I think we all could do more to support each other and just understand what loss feels like in whatever form, and that it takes its toll on people. And that whole care for others can be shown in so many different ways, so people do not feel that they're alone and they feel that they've got the support. Because again, that whole thing of how long it takes you to grieve is entirely up to the person. There is no right or wrong in that. And I really feel that people feel that community society feels that we should move on from grief, like you've had a miscarriage, get over it, on to the next. That doesn't work. I worked on a review where women were fighting for 20 years to find out what happened to their babies. Do you see what I mean? And they never really understood or got over it because they didn't have answers. Yes, I had my answers, but the sadness still remains. It's still sad about what happened. That sadness may never go away, and that's okay. I'm okay with it, I'm okay with telling the story. But we need to be more compassionate to others so that even if they aren't able to share their story more widely, they can get the support that they need. And I think our whole conversation during, what happened with Lioness was all about making sure you had support that you needed, that you could, sharp as you, deal with your own emotions, whatever they were at that time, and know that it wasn't your fault, to be able to move on. And a lot of times we don't get that. We don't get that circle around us that allows us to process in a way that is healthy for us to move on. And I think that's really important. There's a lot that we can all do for people that we know are not okay or touched by death. Those check-ins, and also be prepared that they might not want to share with you. And that's okay, because that's how they process. They may not want to talk about it. That's okay. But the fact that you've showed up and asked, that's the important thing.
Beautiful. I love that. Just showing up and asking. And with that in mind, what would you say to a listener who might be sitting here going, okay, show up and ask? How would I do that? For example, someone who maybe thinks, if I've got a friend who's been through similar or another form of death and I don't have that lived experience, how can I authentically show up for them? What does that look like? I guess in the more practical side of things, what would you say? What would your advice be?
I have had friends who have lost parents, and I've had friends who have lost children. And I think the showing up that I would say is similar for both. It's hey, how you doing? I know this has happened. I know that you may not want to talk about it. I am here for whatever you need. And just keep checking in. Like, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? Really feeling? Because sometimes we're tempted to go, I'm fine. That I'm fine is never I'm fine. It's just I don't want to talk about it. And recognize if they're doing it, they might not be able to talk to you. But the fact, if you just keep checking in periodically, because what happens is usually, maybe the first week, first couple of days, everyone checks in on you. And then they forget. Then you've got a Mother's Day, a Father's Day, a birthday, the anniversary, whatever it is. And then no one's checking in the same way anymore. And you're still sat there. We keep checking in. Keep helping them, and also ask them, are you comfortable with this? Because some of them might not be. But also, you want to give the support in a way that is meaningful to the person. Also, the person may not be able to receive that support yet, but keep asking them and just keep checking in. And saying, I'm going to text you every day. I'm going to try and text you twice a week just to see how you're doing, and just to check in so I'm here. And when you're ready, you can engage with me whenever you want to. So give them permission not to feel like they have to respond as well. We all process grief in different ways, but by showing up and continuing to show up, they will appreciate that. They'll appreciate that you care. And also, if you've got any of your own experiences that have happened to you, and it may not be similar death, it may be a similar death, share them. I'm just going to talk about how I felt, and this is what I did. It may help you, it may not. And they can tell you how they feel.
I love that. And I love that, checking with them, giving them that placement and that permission, because you're right. Yeah, sometimes when you're in your grief, you don't want to respond. And that's okay. And actually, to your point, I've got messages that I probably thinking about it, I'm like, crap, I've probably got quite a lot of messages that I'd never in the kind of immediate aftermath of losing Ngako Raiona, our little lioness heart. There was in that immediate influx, I didn't reply to all of the messages, but actually if some of them had have stuck with it, then 2 weeks later I would have been in the right place, or to have that conversation, or just to know that they were there. Because actually I think we can often And I shine the spotlight on myself of this, sort of prior to this journey specifically, but also even now, I'm not saying that I'm perfect and that I'm going to be perfect for everyone in my orbit, but I definitely put myself on that thing of, I don't want to disturb, or, there's sort of that side of things. But actually you kind of think in that moment, who am I protecting? Is it myself from having an awkward conversation, or is it protecting the other person? And actually, how can I take myself out of my comfort zone to just, like you said, just check in? That little word that really made me smile when I was looking back, and they're like, morning, sweet pea. I remember connecting back into.
Yeah. And I think also when we stop thinking about, am I going to get it right? Then we take a lot of responsibility off our own shoulders. You're never going to get it right. You're never going to get it right. If you come from that place of, I'm just going to check in because I care about this person and I want them to know it, and I'm going to say that to them, then that's okay. But just be prepared. You might never get it right. And that's okay, because it's not about you. It's about them. It's about what they're feeling, what kind of support they need. They might want to say, I don't want to talk. They might not want you to mention the name of the loved one. They might want you to mention the name of the loved one. They might want you to ask. They might not want you to ask. You're not going to ever know until you ask them. And even then, that might change. How they feel today might not feel how they feel tomorrow, because grief is different for everyone. And the emotions are not, you can't predict what is going to happen on a daily basis as to how you feel. So just allow them to go through what they are going through and try and show up as best as you can for them. And if we take ourselves out of it about, I'm scared, what would you want in that moment? If the shoe was on the other foot, how would you want others to show up for you? And then start from there.
I love that. Love that. Also, when you said, around, sort of that you're never going to get it right, but also you can't really get that wrong, because when you're talking to someone who's had the worst thing happening to them, there is nothing worse than what they've been through. So I think you can, again, sort of decenter yourself and see that actually, instead of worrying about your words, there's nothing that you can say that can ever be as bad as what they've exactly just gone through. And I think for me as well, there's that fear of people. I've experienced what I call the roadrunner effect, which is literally people just disappearing, either in body, physically. How the hell can I get as far away from this lady as possible when I talk about what happened? Or in mind, that kind of, I see them just disconnect. And then it's almost like that fear then starts to go, okay, how can we veer this conversation into something that feels more comfortable? But actually, for me, I'm comfortable to it. For some people, and again, some people who've been through it won't want to talk about it, and it's their personal journeys. But all you're going to get met with is do you know what? I don't want to speak about that right now, or anything. And that really is the worst that could happen. But actually, the flip side of that is you might be speaking with someone who's going, oh, thank God, I haven't been able to speak openly about this in months, because no one in my circle is willing to have this conversation. So I think don't underestimate the power of just those simple check-ins. And when you mention around how you're really feeling today, I think that's so important. It's such an easy one, because you're right. We are conditioned. I did it many times. How are you? Just will always elicit from me a preconditioned, oh yeah, I'm fine. response versus the truth. So how you really feeling is the golden one for me, to make me go, okay, there's the really in there. How am I actually, when I go beneath that social mask, how am I actually feeling right now? And also I think for me that shows the openness. When someone says how you really feeling, I'm like, oh, I can go there in this conversation. All right, how deep? Me rubbing my hands together, I'm like, how deep do you want to go? How much time have you got? Where should we start? Start the pregnancy, or and it's so powerful though. Don't underestimate just the power of that simple one-liner.
Yeah. We give them permission to say whatever they need to say. And I think that's really important, just giving people the space that they need to show up when they're ready to show up. And knowing that whenever you show up, there's no judgment there. You're going to listen as much as you can to support.
Yes, I love that. No judgment and listening. And with that in mind, actually, let's go a little bit deeper into, before we close out this conversation, I'd love to talk around sort of death as a taboo and then bring it back into like death on the daily, and the fact that actually death is around us at all points. Why do you think that we as a society have pushed death into the shadows and turned it into such a taboo topic? Big question.
It is. And I think it depends on which society we're referring to.
Yes.
I think if we think about Western culture, I think death has definitely become taboo. If we think about Asian and African cultures, I think death is very much part of the circle of life and community. And it is because we have more of an intergenerational link, where the youngers learn from the elders. They will understand that the elders are dying and take all their wisdom with them. You know, the elders will have lived with the family. And I feel that there's a disconnect between community now and family, and a preoccupation with youth and living longer. And actually not seeing that death is part of the circle of life. You know, if you think about trees or plants, going into Italia and nature, but if you think about the cycle of like a plant, it sheds its leaves, it blooms, it sheds its leaves, it dies back, it grows again. That's life. And so if we think about, our families, we have generations and generations and generations and generations and generations. And if people weren't get married, have children, die, and a new generation come through, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be who we are. And I really think it's about the societies that we live in, and certain societies do not cherish the connection with family, community, and our culture, and that is why death has become taboo.
Yes, I love that. That's circle of life is so important, and we live in a society, well, Western society, where we have basically pushed, well, we prioritize spring and summer, and we don't sort of allow autumn and winter. I mean, you look at capitalism, that's what it is, exponential growth. Always, you're constantly in that summer growth phase, versus allowing that sort of natural dying back, and things, whether it's ourselves, businesses, etc., going into the compost to allow those next generations to spring through with the wisdom passed down. And I think it's such an important point that actually we, in not living with our elders, I lived with my Amama. She came to live with us. She was living in Africa before she retired, and then she came to live with my family. But me being in a Western culture, I now have so many regrets of the fact that I totally took for granted that my Amama and our wise elder was in my home. And even things that I do now, like I meditate twice a day, and my Amama, she was basically doing everything that I now have had to learn and go out and learn on my own accord. And I just think, wow, what a shame. And then to the point around death of that, medicalization also means people are sort of pushed into care homes and hospitals for dying. And similarly, even at birth and death used to happen in the home. So you can't get away from it, can you? And similarly with obviously how prevalent, miscarriage unfortunately is, you couldn't get away from it in a close-knit community, versus now everyone's sort of behind doors and hiding it. So, and if we are trying to, because within your work, you are driving systemic change for that more equitable world. And when we look in this space of death on the daily, and just how we can show up and we can be that ripple effect, do you have any thoughts on death in the daily, how we can embrace it, and the benefit to us and then to those around us when we do?
I think we need to get better at understanding ourselves as people, just as human beings. And I think we would realize that actually we experience so many deaths. So And I'm not talking about the big ones of a miscarriage or a parent or relative, but death of self. So many deaths of self. If we look at through our lifetime who we were to who we are now, there's been an evolution of self. The person who you were is no longer in existence. There may be traces of them, but they're no longer, you're a new person. And so we have to look at the fact that we're always dying. We're always changing, evolving. And if we recognize that, we recognize everything around us is always dying, changing, evolving. And so it's an acceptance of death in so many different forms. And it's also a recognition of what would I want for myself? And in what I would want for myself, how do I then show up for others? And so when we understand ourselves so much better, what we feel, our emotions, the journey that we've been on, our own lived experience, we are better able to step up and show for others, because you understand that actually someone else may need what I have, or what I've seen, or what I've experienced. We have a duty to pass it on. In the same way that I reached out to you because I was like, I've got no choice here instinctively. I'd been passed on support by two other people. I'd had my great boss, the amazing nurse, and then I showed up for you. I know now that you will show up for anyone else. And so we're constantly passing that on to others because we're looking at, okay, what is it I would have needed? You know what you needed. You got what you needed. You are now going to make a difference to someone else who may need this. Understand ourselves so we can understand others and show up for them. That is it. And in all of that, our communications, our interactions are really honest and grounded. And therefore that death isn't a taboo subject because we realize it's just part of life. It's just part of what happens. And so we're not scared of it anymore because actually we're far more grounded in who we are as a person, and we're far more grounded in what's important to others as well.
I love that. Understanding yourself and then understanding how you can best show up for others. And I don't think it even takes that. You don't need to have the specific sort of like linear lived experience to what the other person's going through. Even in that moment, put yourself in what you could imagine was the worst situation happening, the biggest loss or whatever it is. And yeah, exactly that. How would you want people to show up? And I think that as well, you've hit upon the really important point again of that when we really ground into the fact actually death it's a part of everyday life, and for whatever reason we seem to think death is extraordinary. It's not like it's sort of that lightning strike from the skies, and that.
And I think we've kind of forgotten that we're all going to die. It's inevitable.
Exactly that. And tell me, actually, when you think of that sort of, we're all going to die, when you root into that yourself, what message does that bring for you?
That's about making sure for me that I have made a difference to others before I pass. That's all what it's about. What do I need to pass on? How do I need to show up? What difference can I make? And I think sometimes our purpose is just to be the best person that we can be, and not even realize that just by being the best person that we can be, the difference that we make to other people. You don't have to be working on like this project or that project. Sometimes it is the smallest conversations that you have that can mean so much to other people, and I think that's it. You're all going to die. What do you want to be known for? You're not going to be here forever. So you might as well live the best life and, be nice to everyone else around you while you're doing it.
I love that. And really grounding into the simple things that really are the meaning makers. I think to your point, again, we live in a culture that is so rooted in big, lofty, you got to be it, whatever it means.
Yeah.
And it's all rubbish, that everything, all of the research and the anecdotal stories of people on their deathbed says that that's not what matters. What matters is the human connections you've got, the relationships, showing up in kindness, those who showed you the deepest kindness in your life. And that's what I know to be true as well. Like when I think of this experience and I think of the fact that actually I will be on my deathbed thinking about it. And people like yourself, Kristianah, I am not overblowing it, but you have left an imprint that is going to be with me for the rest of my life, and I hope then continues through my ripple effect. It's like those little, the dandelion seeds. You don't know when they blow out, where they settle. That is, for me, that's true impact versus any sort of lofty bragging rights, sort of the stuff that used to be like formally in my career that I used to sort of get the biggest kick out of, to the detriment of me actually prioritizing that which really mattered, which is those who I love, and simple moments of joy with them.
And I think that's the impact we can all make. It's the little things that make the biggest impact to other people. How we show up for others we should not underestimate that. That's the power that we all have, to show up for someone else. That is really simple. We can do that every day. You don't have to train to do that.
I love that. It's funny, you don't have to train to do that, but I kind of feel like there's probably some sort of training that we do need to we do need to collectively have around, to that point, around just how we hold space for each other. I mean, I have actually done holding space training, so I have trained in this, by the way. But it is really profound, because we're not taught that. And obviously we as coaches, we get it, we've trained in it, and you kind of got to be a good listener to be a coach. But out there, and even when I was in my final 3 months of Formula One, I was training to be a coach. It was the first time that I'd ever actually had formal training in just listening. And my whole team were like, wow, I had so much feedback being like, oh, you've really changed. This is different. And team members being really empowered and really flying with things just through listening and asking questions. And I was like, oh wow, if only they'd have done coaching training at the start of my managerial career. But it's so important. We're not taught it at school. It's just not a thing.
I agree. And I think, and although I don't advocate everyone becoming a coach, I think everyone should have coaching training, because of, as you said, Tanya, that ability to hold space for others, and that ability to actively listen, and not just to hear what someone has said to you, but also what is unsaid and what sits underneath that, because that's when you understand what's really going on for them. And when you ask questions and you come from a place of curiosity, that's where you actually understand what's going on with someone else and how you can show up for them. Because actually you're really listening. You're not just hearing the fine. You're going, okay, tell me a bit more about that fine. What kind of fine? What are you really feeling? And then you'll get an answer. And you're like, okay, this is where they're at. This is how I can help them, how I can support them. And I think that's the thing. I remember COVID and the ability of people to check in with people in a way where they really were asking, how are you doing? They asked in a way as if they really cared. And we've moved on from COVID, and everyone's forgot to check in. Everyone's forgot to really ask how people are doing, and really listen again. And it's like we all need to take that pause and really listen to each other again. So we're not having subjects that are taboo and we don't talk about, and people feel closed off, and then they develop other challenges because they haven't got the support around them, or they don't feel like they can talk to people, or people aren't listening to them. That's the biggest thing we can all do, really listen to the people around us and what they're telling us. Because if they're talking, it's important.
Yes, I love that. And you shared the word I really felt was that curiosity, just openness, curious, ask questions, see what answers you get. And actually, to someone who's saying, I'm fine. Actually, that curiosity can really change things. And what's the worst that's going to happen? You're just going to, maybe the doors keep shut, but maybe the next time, if you keep checking in and asking those questions, that at some point that door will open a little bit. So that's such a beautiful one, and particularly when we sort of look into the topics of death and grief and stuff that does feel uncomfortable for us, but actually take the pressure off us. We're not here to give advice. We're just here to ask questions and understand where they are and understand what can best support them. So that's really beautiful. So we've talked about impermanence, and as we embrace death on the daily, we see how everything in this life is impermanent. This conversation has been such a joy, but it's now start to bring it to its natural ending and completion. But before we do, Kristianah, I just wanted you to share any final words that you feel called to, as well as if there's anything that you want to share around your work and where our listeners can connect with you.
No. No, I'm joking. Literally, probably the easiest place to find me. First name and surname. I know Tanya's going to put it up because if I had to spell my first name and surname, I would be here all day. It's very, very long. And think about, I'd say to everyone else, when you think about yourself, what would you want for yourself? And with that in mind, what is it you can do and show up for others, knowing what you would want for yourself?
Oh my goodness, I am feeling those final words. Thank you so much, Kristianah. I so appreciate you for everything that you've done for me in my journey and everything that you continue to do. And obviously, thank you so much as well for connecting today and bringing all of you to a very difficult conversation that is so taboo in our society. Let's raise this conversation. Let's raise the connection when it comes to the themes of death, but also specifically miscarriage, and let's support those around us. So thank you so much, Kristianah.
Thank you for having me.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside. And we'll never make it, and we'll never break it.